Thanks to those joining me live and to those that be joining me on Archive. I'm being joined right now by Stormy B. Man, we're live for little this Caesar's Palace, Las Vegas in the 1980s, man. Flash to the past. What's going on, Stormy?
Hey man, what's happening with you? Glad to be here. Let's get it going for another fantasy tournament. This time featuring the featherweights. I'm excited.
Absolutely. For those listening on Archive, make sure you throw a jab at the like button. Make sure that the like button does turn blue. This is part one of the featherweight tournament, and tomorrow on Sunday we'll be on at 8 p.m. Eastern time for the finale. The winner of this bracket will face tomorrow's winner of that bracket. So let's go ahead and get this started, man. But before we get started, Stormy, me, I grew up really into the featherweights, and the featherweight division was a division that my grandfather grew up in. Because in California and Southern California especially is where he would work when he was living in Mexico, and then later he moved to the U.S. but in Texas, and I mean it was filled with a lot of featherweight championship fights in that area all the way back. If you go all the way back to the 50s, Pajarito Moreno lost his shot to win the title against Hogan Basie, and from the Moore all the way back, and a lot of great fighters throughout the history. What I like about this division is these guys can, it's very action packed. They throw a lot of punches, but it's also a division where they can still hurt each other. You don't see a lot of one punch knockouts. You see a lot of stoppages, but you still see knockouts and action. And that's what I love about this division. What are your thoughts on the featherweight division all around?
I think the featherweight division was always a little underrated because the little guys, the smaller you get, the more impactful the technique and skill set comes into play. But featherweight division was one of the divisions where you could still get a guy who can punch and have crowd pleasing results as it goes. Some of the most exciting boxing matches, even in recent memory, can take you back to that division. And another thing, because of the size of the guys, there's not a lot of where disproportion fighters are there. Like in the welterweight, sometimes you could get a 6'3" welterweight or something like that.
Right.
Usually the feathers are pretty close in size and stature, and they are, they're exciting, man. And when you get a couple of them that can punch well, then you're really in for a treat. That's what I think.
Yeah, man, absolutely, and I definitely agree with that. Well said. Let's get this tournament started here. Shout out to BF2B. I appreciate the support. Let's just salute to D-Style and Stormy. Let's get it, he says. Absolutely. Juan Manuel Marquez going up against Tom Johnson. Juan Manuel Marquez was a featherweight from the 90s all the way up to the mid-2000s. He stands at 5'7" with 67-inch reach. He'll be facing Tom Johnson, who was from the late 80s to the mid-90s, was a featherweight himself. He stands at 5'5.5", 68-inch reach. He is from the United States, of course. Marquez is mostly known for that featherweight, that Pacquiao fight where he got up 3 times from the canvas, and as we know, went on to fight to a draw. He had a loss against Norwood and Chris John as well, both controversial, but nonetheless he lost. He did have a win over Orlando Salido, and he did beat a guy called Gainer who beat Norwood. After Norwood had beaten him, a little bit of a triangle theory there. Tom Johnson, he did lose to Hamed in the late 90s by TKO in the 8th round. Manuel Medina did beat him, but he did win the trilogy by beating him the 2 times after. How do you see this matchup playing out, Stormy? They're both in the ring. How do you see it?
Well, this is an interesting match because Tom Boom Boom Johnson could actually box a bit. He had a reputation for being able to drop a solid right hand. Hold on one second. I'm sorry. I've got some noise in my background. That's my washing machine. But he had a reputation for being able to drop a serious right hand. One second, guys.
You're right. All right, well, Stormy gets ready there. My CPFTB says he's got Juan Manuel Marquez winning by split decision. I think it's a very good boxing fight, guys. But
Sorry
go ahead,
about that,
Stormy.
fellas. I'm back. The fact that he could drop that right hand, it was a very solid punch for him. Juan Manuel Marquez, underrated defensively when he was at his really best. And he was a very schooled fighter as well. I think that this is one of those fights where these guys would be drawn into a war. And there's just something about Marquez to me that he seems to be able to think under pressure a lot better than Tom Boom Boom Johnson. Because when Tom Boom Boom Johnson began to decline and he started to lose, I noticed that he wouldn't remember to do the certain things he needed to do to protect himself. And I think that Marquez could take advantage of that. He would be able to catch him with shots, that, defense, lack of defensive responsibility. He could overwhelm Tom Boom Boom, but it would be a hard fought fight. And I see Juan Manuel Marquez stopping him late in the fight, if not just going to a unanimous decision.
Well said, Stormy. I do agree with you. I think Marquez would stop him late. They do call him, Dinamita, dynamite. And at featherweight, he was a hell of a puncher, and he could hurt somebody, knock somebody out at that weight class for sure. I think, but I do think, however, that Johnson would give him a hell of a fight for the first 5-6 rounds. Marquez might even be down on the cards even, but I think he's going to time him. I think he's going to catch him. I think he knocks him out late. The crowd is just coming in, okay, right now to the Caesars Palace. How do you think the crowd's going to react to this fight here, Stormy?
And I see this being one of those fights where the crowd will really get into it as it gets to the later rounds. I could see which venue did you say this is?
Caesars Palace in
Caesars
the 80s.
Palace. They loved their boxing at Caesars Palace. The fans would get up on their feet. They would be cheering and high-fiving after rounds of extreme action and everything. So I could see the same thing happening with these two guys, because that third quarter of the fight, those last 4 rounds, I'm telling you, that is where you're going to see the action really amp up. And like I said, I would expect a stoppage by Juan Manuel or a unanimous decision, but I could see that Caesars crowd going nuts in the last portion of that fight.
Yeah, most definitely. I got Marquez. Stormy's got Marquez. Chat, press 1 for Juan Manuel Marquez. Press 2 for Tom Johnson. How do you guys see it, Stormy? I think the new school is finally going to get a win after that beating they got in the middleweight tournament.
So. Yeah, but it really comes down to how seasoned the new school are, and with Marquez coming up under that tutelage of, was that, what's his trainer's name again? I'm
Nacho Bernstein.
Nacho Bernstein. Yeah, I'm sorry. That gentleman knew how to prepare his fighters. I mean, he doesn't get enough respect and notoriety as a trainer and coach, but I've watched several of his proteges, and he has always had his men prepared. So Bernstein, I really like the work he has done in the sport and with fighters.
Absolutely, man. It looks like the chat is pretty unanimous here in Juan Manuel Marquez pulling this early win. I see Curtis in the background. I'll see you when you're ready there, Curtis. No problem. But it looks like Juan Manuel Marquez, and this was Curtis's pick. He did pick this fight. I don't want to ask him what he saw in this fight personally, but it looks pretty unanimous here. Let's go ahead.
I would like to hear his take on it, though.
Yeah, most definitely, man. The crowd. I think the crowd will be a little quiet at first, though, in this fight. It's going to be a very tactical chess match for at least, I think, the first 3 or 4 rounds.
Well,
You think
that's why I said that last quarter of the fight, when the action got turned up, the crowd at Caesars would get turned up. And it would be
yeah.
because Juan Manuel is breaking down Tom Boom Boom, you know, but Boom Boom is not going to go out easy. He's going to be trying to land that shot to knock the other guy out. But he was an action fighter, but a lot like Tommy Hearns in the sense that his chin may not have been A class. You know what I mean? He had a sturdy chin, but against a fighter like Juan Manuel, who's going to be banging the body, breaking him down, and I just see that left hook getting in there and causing some serious trouble for him late in the fight.
Most definitely. You there with us, Curtis?
Yes.
Awesome. All right, Curtis. How do you personally see this fight, man, with Marquez and Tom Johnson?
Well, there's levels to this. Tom Johnson is an action fighter. I've seen him many times. He's just not on the level of a Juan Manuel Marquez. Marquez is not a good fighter. He's a great fighter. There's a big difference, man. You know, we talk about, you know, who's better, Mayweather, Pacquiao in this era. Well, I got Pacquiao third. I always thought Marquez was a better fighter than Pacquiao. He proved it in the last fight. You know, I just saw the third fight. I thought he beat him for sure. And that fight as well. You know, Marquez is a terrific fighter. I mean, there's not much. When you talk about great Mexican fighters, there's not much room when you talk about the Finito Lopez's and the Julio Cesar Chavez's. Juan Manuel is right there with those guys. I mean, he's right there. You know, and you know, the Pacquiao fight, he just showed you how great he was. I mean, he has this left-right combination, right-left. Sometimes he mixes it up, but he throws this uppercut. And that uppercut was killing Pacquiao in the third fight. And then if Tom Johnson is in the ring with him, he knocks him out with the uppercut. You know, I love, you know, he caught Juan Diaz with a beautiful combination in a tough fight. You know, Marquez knocks out Johnson somewhere between 7 to 8. Johnson surprisingly will have a moment or two early in the fight, but you know, Marquez will prevail, and you know, he'll start breaking Tom Johnson down, and he'll get him out of there with an uppercut, left hand, whatever. Marquez, great fighter, man, as I studied him throughout the years.
Absolutely, man. And there we go. Marquez advances. Go ahead and segue us to this matchup, Curtis. We have Vasyl Lomachenko, right? He was a you know, featherweight from 2013 to 2016. Southpaw, 5'7", 6'5", and of course Salvador Sanchez, an odds-on favorite in this tournament. He was from 79 to 82, orthodox, 5'6", 6'8" reach, only 23 years of age when he unfortunately passed away. How do you see this matchup, Curtis?
Well, it's funny that you say 79 to 82 because my second favorite fighter ruled the boxing ring, but Sanchez was right there. That was Sugar Ray Leonard, his best years. Salvador Sanchez, best years was 79 to 82. You know, he beat Hall of Famers, man, the underrated Juan Laporte and Azumah Nelson and Wilfredo Gomez. You know, people don't realize, man, Danny Little Red Lopez, that Wilfredo Gomez was such a terror. He had 32 straight knockouts along with Deontay Wilder. That's in the Guinness Book of World Records. He had 17 straight knockouts and title defenses. That's a record. You know, he made Wilfredo Gomez look like mincemeat, man. And he was the underdog in that fight. He broke his cheekbone in the first round. You know, he had a bad swell on his face. I mean, he beat the hell out of Gomez, and he was going to fight him in a rematch. He was going to fight Alexis Arguello. Don King was putting that fight together. You know, Salvador Sanchez is one of the very best, not only Mexican fighters, but fighters in general. The guy was a master counterpuncher with long arms. He can box from distance. You know, he was just a brilliant brilliant fighter. And Lomachenko is a very good fighter. I won't call him great, like Jim Lampley and, jumping over the moon for the guy. The guy lost to Salido. I can't see a Salvador Sanchez ever losing to a Salido. It ain't happening. You put Lomachenko in that era, he's going to have multiple losses. I'm not sure he beats Juan Laporte. He ain't beating Rafael Gomez. He's getting knocked out. I don't know he's beating Danny Little Red Lopez. He might get past him. He might. That's a big might. Little Red can crack. Lomachenko is a good fighter. I got him number 2 presently behind Crawford. But when I look at that Luke Campbell fight, that fight bothers me, man. He shouldn't have to struggle against a stiff guy, man, again, like Luke Campbell, man. Luke Campbell Soup and Anthony Toyota Corolla. You fighting these guys, man. And, and Linares got knocked down. That happens in boxing. But this isn't a matchup for the ages. It will be one-sided, though, in Salvador Sanchez's favor. Salvador Sanchez counterpunch Lomachenko into oblivion. He knocks him out in 8 rounds with ease. Salvador Sanchez by TKO over Lomachenko. Lomachenko too small. Salvador Sanchez, a big featherweight with long arms and a master counterpuncher. Bad style matchup for Vasyl. Salvador Sanchez by KO.
Right, Stormy. Lomachenko's wobbly. Okay, at Caesar's Palace. How do you see it?
I cannot go away from what Kurt said. The only difference is that with Salvador's height and reach and boxing ability, there would be no place for Vasyl to hide. He wouldn't be able to step to the side on angles. He wouldn't be able to jump in and out because when he goes out, Salvador can still touch him and reach him. So it's like this is a total whitewash for Salvador Sanchez, and I wish it could happen for real because that's the kind of thing I would love to see happen to Vasyl, because he needs to go in there after all of the hype, as guys in the chat mentioned, that drove him as an unproven pro with only 15, 16 fights, if that, taking on someone like Salvador. No, he would be bested easily and probably hurt. Kurt alluded and everything. Listen, the man could punch, and catching you at the end of those shots, dude, I would just, can we have that fight, please? Even let's get it on a video game or something, because this would be where you see Vasyl Lomachenko get exactly what he deserves, a professional butt kicking.
Well, right here, I definitely believe that Salvador Sanchez, who always just stayed cold and composed and never like a poker face throughout the damn fight, you can never read him or his emotions. And I think Vasyl Lomachenko would get broken down. I think he might survive because it's only 12 rounds instead of 15. But I do foresee a late round stoppage, if anything. And the chat agrees.
He ain't surviving. He getting knocked out.
Getting knocked out. Yeah, I could see that. But I do agree Salvador Sanchez makes it. We're going to move on here. It's pretty unanimous. So Naseem Hamed, the Prince, against Ruben Olivarez. Just go over this really quick. Prince Nas is a southpaw. He does have an amazing 83% KO ratio, which is amazing for a featherweight. All right. He from the mid-90s to 2002 at featherweight stands at 5'4", 64-inch reach. Going up against Ruben Olivarez, El Puas, meaning the little sharp one. He was an orthodox fighter, but he himself had 75% KO ratio. Keep in mind that his best days were at bantamweight, but he did fight, all right, from the early 70s to the 1980. He fought at featherweight, stood 5'5", 67-inch reach. Curtis, how does Ruben Olivarez at featherweight fair against Prince Naseem.
He's gonna beat Naseem. Hamed is a flash in the pan. You talk about overhype. You know, his antics got him over. It got people interested. But Marco Antonio Barrera exposed all that, and he never recovered. So that tells me he was weak mentally. When he lost to Barrera, basically he threw his hands up in the air and said, "Oh well, I had a nice little run." To this day, he talk about his run like he was on top for 10 to 15 years. No, it wasn't. He should have lost to Kevin Kelly if Kevin Kelly listened to his corner, which he didn't. He had him dead to rights. Hamed brung excitement, and I like any fighter who brings excitement in the ring. Overhyped, overrated, yes. Good power, absolutely. He had thick legs like Pacquiao, so that was his foundation as a puncher. But Olivares was relentless, man. He was two-fisted power, put pressure on you, will bang with you till the Dickens come home. I like Olivares to wear down Hamed and knock him out in 9 to 10 rounds. I got Olivares KOing Naseem Hamed. He didn't have a great beard at all, made a lot of mistakes. So that in the Barrera fight, Olivares will take advantage of that. I got Olivares knocking out Hamed.
There you go. And Stormy, how do you see this one?
Sorry about that. Trying to come off of mute again. I tell you about these buttons. Ruben Olivarez. This is a throwback fighter. Just the type of throwback professional fighter who could be technical enough to expose all of the faults that Naseem Hamed present when he fought in the ring. I see Naseem Hamed being knocked out in the middle rounds. I see Olivares being able to capitalize a lot like Marco Antonio Barrera, but probably with a little bit more roughhousing, because Hamed is the type of fighter and personality that he could rub the opponents the wrong way and get guys, amped up and ready for him. But Olivares would be like, again, Barrera, cool under fire and take the fight to him. I would like to see this fight as well, because it would give you a chance to see somebody take acute advantage of Hamed's mistakes and batter him before finishing him off. So I see like an 8th round TKO.
All right, chat. Give me a 1 for Naseem Hamed. Give me a 2 for Olivares. Look, I do think that Hamed might catch Olivares or something. However, make no mistake about it, even at featherweight, you look at this dude, he still had knockouts in the 2nd round, 3rd round against dudes. He was dangerous. And the other thing, he was battle tested. So even though it wasn't his optimal, weight class, he was battle tested, and he was going to bring a certain toughness that I don't know if Prince Naseem Hamed could deal with. Outside of catching Olivares and them stopping the fight, prematurely or something, I don't see how Prince Naseem Hamed gets out of this one. I agree. Olivares wins this one. All right. A couple of people. BFTB, you cannot vote more than once. All right. But nonetheless, that'll be that. All right. We're going to move on to the next fight here. And that's Yuriorkis Gamboa, El Ciclón de Guantánamo. He was a featherweight from 2007 to 2011. Orthodox fighter, 5'5" with a 65-inch reach. All right. Undefeated at featherweight versus Flushing Flash, Kevin Kelly. Right. From the late 80s to the early 2000s, he was a featherweight. Southpaw, 5'7" with a 71-inch reach. Stormy, how do you see this matchup?
Man, the Flushing Flash. I love that dude, man. I used to love to watch Kevin Kelly's fights. He was never in a boring fight. He always brought it. That being said, Yuriorkis Gamboa would be able to capitalize on Kevin Kelly's lack of focus. That was his Achilles. He could kind of get drawn off focus and be vulnerable to someone's attack. And Gamboa was the kind of guy, he could strike with some power at that weight. And I think that he could get to Kevin Kelly some kind of way. It just, Kevin would probably be outboxing him and going toward a decision or something like that, and then do something stupid and get dropped a couple of times and possibly stopped. He also had a problem with his eyes swelling up a lot when he was in against quality opposition. I don't know if he was like just blowing through his nose too much and too hard, but it seemed to be a problem late in his career. It wasn't early, but late. And that would inhibit his ability to see shots coming. And that's how he could get caught easy. So this one, I'm taking Gamboa in an upset, possible like 10th or 11th round TKO.
Ooh, all right, man. The crowd at Caesar is going crazy. But let's see if Kevin Kelly could turn it around. How do you see it, Curtis?
This is one of the best fights of all the tournament, Gamboa and Kelly, because it's a 50-50 fight. This fight is interesting because both guys, lack focus, mental toughness, if you ask me. Not toughness, but focus, excuse me. Kevin Kelly is a good fighter, but he was always missing something, just like Yorkis, Gamboa. They have that in common. It didn't really come together for Gamboa as a fighter. For some reasons, Cuban fighters can't make the transition from amateur to pro, and he's a guy that I thought would be a lot better. I could see Kevin Kelly outboxing Gamboa for 6 or 7 rounds. Gamboa will have his moments because of his speed, and Kelly get hit way too easy. He should be better defensively. Both guys will be on the canvas. It will be a barn burner. Kelly will be winning the fight until the 8th or 9th round, and Gamboa will catch him with something big, hurt him, stagger, and he will knock Kevin Kelly out, I would say around 10th round. Well, both guys will have their moments. Both guys will be on the deck multiple times, but it will be a war of attrition because Kelly ain't going to give up. Look at the Alejandro Combrita Gonzalez fight. That's a great fight. The Derek Gainer fights, Prince Nassim fights, Troy Dorsey. He's tough, but he should be more smarter, I thought, throughout his career. Gamboa has fast hands as well, and he too have mental lapses, but he gets the job done by TKO in the 10th round over Kevin Kelly.
All right, it's Ciclón de Guantanamo has a hell of a lead here. I do agree he would win this fight, possibly by I'm looking at a decision here, but I do see a hell of a fight, a hell of a 12-round contest. Kevin Kelly, he did have that win, over Humberto Soto, Gregorio Vargas, Jesse Benavidez from Corpus Christi. Hell of a fighter in his own right. But again, Gamboa, he has his win, pretty solid win over Orlando Salido, Jorge Solis, Ponce de Leon, although that one's at 130, I believe. But nonetheless, I think this is a hell of a fight, and I do agree with what Curtis said. It's probably the best matchup, and Caesar's Palace would go crazy for this. With that said, chat, give me a 1 for Yorkis Gamboa. Give me 2 for Kevin Kelly. Does the chat see it differently? All right. And while we wait on the chat to kind of vote on that, we're going to go ahead and move on to the next bout here. All right. Let me, if I can pull it up. All right. And look at this fight. All right. It's the Dragon, all right, against Azumah Nelson. Chris John from Indonesia, orthodox fighter, 5'6", 69-inch reach. From 1999 all the way to 2013 was a featherweight. Right, he had a draw with Rocky Juarez and won the rematch. He has a win over Fernando Salcedo from Argentina, and Juan Manuel Marquez is his biggest win, in my opinion, by far. Defended his title against 16 different fighters. Many of them, we got to kind of look for them and find out who they are, but nonetheless. But Azumah Nelson, the professor, right? From the early 80s all the way to 1989, man, stands 5'9", 68-inch reach, orthodox fighter as well. Curtis, how do you see this one?
I'll tell you, Chris John, a good fighter. Like you mentioned, you read his resume. Azumah Nelson, great fighter. There's a quantum leap between good and great. People often overuse the word great, but Azumah Nelson probably the best fighter ever to come out of Africa. This guy was in the ring with Salvador Sanchez. He was green, gave it all he can against Sanchez. He went to Puerto Rico and knocked out Wilfredo Gomez. That's a feat. You know, he was in wars with Jesse James Leija. He was in the ring with Pernell Whitaker. You know, I mean, those are top-notch names, man. That's pedigree right there, being in the ring with those guys. Azumah Nelson, Jeff Finnick, too. Went to Australia and knocked him out, the tough Jeff Finnick. You know, I got Azumah Nelson knocking out Chris John in the 11th round because Azumah Nelson was a great late round fighter, you know, second half fighter. I thought the Sanchez loss made him even a better fighter. He learned from that. You know, there will be boxing the first 6 rounds, and then you're going to see the level and talent take over from Nelson. He's going to start hitting him to the body, his left hook, you know, and I think he's going to wear down Chris John and take him out between 10 and 11. I'll say 11, so it'll be 11 round TKO for Azumah Nelson. Too much skill, too much power.
Absolutely. Not to mention taking the Salvador Sanchez fight with just 2 weeks notice. And I remember a couple years ago, I saw an interview of his where he said he had cut something with his mouthpiece. He was like cutting it. So when he got punched in the mouth by Salvador, it cut him inside his mouth. And he had to fight like that for practically the whole fight, which is insane. But Stormy, how do you see this one, man? The Dragon against the Professor.
The Professor would be a Dragon Slayer. This is an easy one for me because I've watched Azumah Nelson take guys apart and fight wars like with Jesse James Leija, as Kurt mentioned, but only because he wanted to. You know, he was very good at setting opponents up, drawing them in, and then taking them apart while they're coming in. And before you know it, he turns the tables on them and knocks them out. He had a great wide left hook to the body, but then he had a wild, it was a right hook that he could throw from being in a corner or off the ropes, a place and a status that he would always look to bait people in. And I think that John would be definitely called into that type of trap. You know, Azumah Nelson was so talented as a featherweight, and he was so smart. His ring IQ was something that you would like to see from a lot of other fighters that want to consider themselves in a class of greatness. Just think about how he could barely win a round against Pernell Whitaker for all he knew and brought to the fight game. And that lets you know how special Pernell was. So with Azumah Nelson, it would be no contest. I give him like a 9th or 10th round stoppage in this.
Yeah, and then at featherweight, I mean, the guy could crack for that weight class. And the one thing about Chris John is this. Look, I watch boxing, and half of the dudes he defended his title against, no offense to them, I didn't know who the hell they were. I knew about Rocky Juarez, though, and Rocky Juarez, just like he did against Barrera, would bring a certain type of pressure. And I felt Juarez got robbed in that first fight when he called it a draw. He also hurt John a couple times, and he was having trouble with even him. You know, so with that said, And this will not, and also this will not be in Indonesia. This would be in Las Vegas. So I have the professor winning this by about 7 or 8 round stoppage. And we'll go ahead. Chat, press 1 for John, 2 for Nelson, and we will keep this one moving. Orlando Salido versus David Cote. All right. Now, Cote is also from Ghana. Speaking of that, he stands at 5'7". All right. A fighter out of the 70s, has a big win over Ruben Olivarez for the WBC title. That's a fight that caused a damn riot. Okay. And he also gave that famous quote saying, Ruben Olivares was a great bantamweight, but he's not the same fighter anymore, he said. Orlando Salido, we know about him, all right? He's just a, rough, rugged dude, 5'6", 68, 7-inch reach. We know about his wins over Juan Manuel Lomachenko, but he did lose to, Juan Manuel Marquez, Gamboa, Mikey Garcia. So with that said, how do you see it, Curtis? How do you see this matchup?
This is one of the more interesting matchups because Cote was a good fighter. He really was one of the better African fighters, to have success. Orlando Salido was rough and tough. He was in wars with a lot of people. Juan, of course, of Puerto Rico. They have 2 great fights. He beat Lomachenko, the Wonder Boy, I guess you call him. His style would be troublesome for Cote. Cote would have his moments. He really would. He would win some rounds against Salido, but I like the pressure, the passion that Salido brings in the ring, in a fight. This will be a close fight. Both men will have their moments. I like a majority decision for Salido and a very tough fight because David Cote was good. He did beat Olivarez. Olivarez may be a little past it, but I like Salido by majority decision over David Cote.
Yo, Salido playing spoiler, but will he? Stormy, how do you see this one?
For this one, I think I'm going to have to go the other way. I think that David Cote would be able to put enough on Salido to make him pay. Sometimes fighters have a stubbornness about themselves, and Salido, when he was able to have his way with Lomachenko, it was basically that Lomachenko was having difficulty dealing with his style. But I don't think that Cote was a person to shy away from contact. Like I say, fighting against Olivarez, being able to be strong in there, and not just physically strong, but mentally strong. And sometimes guys who play the bully, as Salido did against Lomo, when they can't bully, they need to have something to back that up, which would be technical capability. And I don't believe that Salido had enough of the boxing skills to, if they got into a war and a good scrape, to be able to change it up and do something else. And Cote would be able to come on and break him down, in later rounds. I see that being a fight of attrition and intestinal fortitude. They will be laying it on the line, and it's just a matter of which guy might have a little more in the tank. And in this instance, I'm going to go with Cote.
Man, when you get a Mexican and dude out of Ghana and they go at it, bro, usually it's a war. And we got a war here in Caesar's Palace. The crowd's going crazy. I'm going to put it up to the chat. It's up to you guys on who will advance from this one. Okay? So listen to me very, very closely. It's going to come down to you guys. Give me a 1 for Orlando Salido. Give me a 2 for David Cote. This would be a huge upset if Salido wins. I don't know about huge, but it'll be an upset. All right. So let me know what you guys see. Right. While I calculate that, as you guys vote on that, Gary Russell Jr. against Alexis Arguello. All right. This is a hell of a fight. All right. A hell of a, fight. Well, maybe. Gary Russell has, since 2009, he's been an active featherweight, 5'4", 64-inch reach. Has a loss over Lomachenko. He does have a win over Johnny Gonzalez and Joseph Diaz. Alexis, el flaco explosivo, TNT. All right, from Nicaragua, orthodox fighter. All right, Gary is a southpaw, by the way. 72% KO ratio. He's 5'10". 72-inch reach. The dimensions, bro. Like, I know you said, Stormy, you rarely see that at featherweight, but he has a dimensions advantage. And I want to take it to you, Stormy. How do you see Alexis Arguello against Gary Russell Jr.?
Man, Gary Russell Jr. is a guy out there today that really needs a fight against quality opposition to really show what he can bring to the ring. There are too many guys out there that are potential opponents for him that are just not giving him that opportunity. And that's disheartening, because in a fight like this against a great fighter like Alexis Arguello, Gary Russell Jr. gets murdered. And it's funny because he has great hand speed and everything, but he's no Aaron Pryor. And I believe that the shortest distance between 2 points is a straight line, and he would be able to drop that right hand. Arguello would over the top of Gary Russell at some point in that fight. And because Arguello's right hand was like Tommy Hearns, at some point when he hit Gary Russell, Gary would either go down, stagger, and realize, oh, this guy could really pop and look to survive, or he'll get knocked out. It's not going to be a thing of where he will survive to the distance, because once Arguello hits guys and he gets that range down and everything, he looks to finish the job off. And he was a silent assassin. He was very poker faced. He went about his workmanlike manner. And Gary Russell is a guy who keeps his hands low too. Even though he has fast hands, he fights not from a higher guard. He fights for his hands are beneath his shoulders. And that's a perfect target for a fighter that's a straight-on shooter like Alexis Arguello. So I got Arguello by like a 9th or 10th round stoppage, but it could happen much earlier if Gary waded in and didn't respect the power straight off the bat. Because with a guy who punches like Arguello, you don't necessarily get a second chance after he's touched you. That's how I see that fight.
Curtis, how do you see this one?
Wow. The bad matchup for Gary Russell Jr., man. He's 5'4". He's very small, man, like a Smurf. You know, and Alexis Arguello is 5'10", with a booming right hand, good jab, man, and, you know, a very patient fighter. Gary Russell, it will look like the Billy Costello fight when he fought Arguello. Costello had fast hands. He was outboxing Arguello, and one single right hand, boom, you know, and that did it. And it was a combination that, you know, that it was the coup de grace. That was it, finishing touch.
Sure.
I see the same thing happen with Gary Russell Jr. I can see him winning the first 2 rounds on speed, you know, with his speed, but Alexis Arguello is a patient fighter, a smart fighter, high boxing IQ. He's gonna time Gary Russell. Gary Russell do make mistakes. You know, I see him, but he doesn't fight world, you know, level competition. You know, and Arguello be waiting to drop that straight right hand, and you know, Gary's a southpaw, and how you beat a southpaw straight right hand, you know, right down the pipe. So it's a bad matchup for Gary Russell. He doesn't have the dimensions, or he's like Stormy said, he's not Aaron Pryor. You had 2 special fighters in the ring. Gary's a good fighter. I don't like the way he's been looking lately, but that's just me. Arguello, you know, knocks out Russell in 7 rounds. Straight right hand. Russell doesn't recuperate. Combination against the ropes. Referee stops it. 7-round TKO. Arguello over Russell.
There you go. And I do agree, man. The dimensions are going to be way too much. And I think Alexis Arguello takes this one. Chat, give me a 1 for Gary Russell Jr. Give me a 2 for Alexis Arguello. Do you see it any differently? The hand speed might give him some trouble early on, But as he throws those punches down the pipe, like Stormy says, I think that's going to give Gary Russell a lot of problems. And he could be timed. And we saw it a little bit in the Lomachenko fight as well. So, and also Orlando Salido, per the chat vote, does advance as well. First upset of this tournament anyway. Orlando Salido beats Cote. And I did not expect that. All right, so we're going to go ahead and move on to the next matchup as you guys give me your votes there. All right, 1, Gary Russell, 2, Alexis Arguello. All right, Nicholas Walters, the Axe Murder, going up against Danny Lopez, El Coloradito, a.k.a. Little Red. Walters, 70% KO ratio, big puncher, as we know. He's 5'7", 73-inch reach from Jamaica. All right, going up against Danny Lopez from 74 to 80. He was featherweight. He stood at 5'7", 71-inch reach. Their dimensions are pretty much identical outside of the 2-inch reach advantage by Walters. How do you see this one, Curtis?
Well, you have two punchers. So it's going to be a war of attrition. Both guys is going to hurt each other. You know, Walters going to hurt Lopez first, and then Lopez going to return the favor. He's going to hurt Walters, you know, and then hurt Walters again. I can see Lopez knocking Walters down. And I'm going to tell you something. I don't like quitters, man. And Nicholas Walter is a quitter. And after being down for the third time in 5 rounds, he doesn't come out for the 6th round. He quits on the stool. Lopez TKOs Walter, 6-round knockout.
Ooh, and Stormy, how do you see this one? The final match, the final first rounder here.
This is the Danny Lopez that fought Salvador, right?
Yeah, I mean,
yeah, I think he fought Salvador Sanchez twice.
Twice, yep.
Okay. Nicholas Walters gets murdered. Okay, because this is one of those throwback fighters that these guys were used to fighting 15 rounds. They fought tough, they fought hard, they fought frequent. And as Curtis just alluded to with Nicholas Walters, this guy, he already had the negative dog brought out of him, you know, in a fight against Lomachenko. No, there's no way. This is a fight that's a bad matchup. It's a bad decision to take a fight against Danny Lopez with Nicholas Walters. He has absolutely nothing for this guy. Nothing. And I see this being like a 7th round stoppage.
Yep. And plus, I mean, you have to question the fortitude of Walters at this point. You know, he hasn't even come back to fight. You know, we don't even know where he's at right now. We're surprised he showed up for this tournament, but nonetheless, I do agree that Danny Lopez wins this fight. Little Red, all right, with his little what do you call it, like the feather cap and stuff. So I think he wins this one. All right. So far, I mean, this first rounder, you know, one upset. You know, anything could happen. It is the featherweight division. And we're going to go ahead and go on to a monster matchup. Mexico versus Mexico. We're going to start the 2nd round here. It's Juan Manuel Marquez going mano y mano against Salvador Sanchez. I'm going to let you take this one first, Curtis. How do you see Marquez against Sanchez?
Oh man, this is a monster matchup, man. Oh my gosh, man. I have the utmost respect for Juan Manuel Marquez, man. Great fighter, you know, but he's fighting somebody who can literally walk on water, you know, and it's going to be a tough fight. It will not be easy for Sanchez because Sanchez is a master counterpuncher, but so is Marquez. Marquez is a beautiful counterpuncher. He's very smart and he's patient. He leaves his hands folded little too much for Sanchez. Sanchez presses the action, and Marquez is going to have his moments, but so will Sanchez. He will have even more, because he throws a fusillade of punches. He's very aggressive. He's very offensive minded, and he takes a great shot. We don't talk about his beard, his chin. He takes a hell of a shot, man. He took some shots against Gomez when Gomez tried to get back into the fight, but to no prevail, didn't do anything. It just bounced off like rubber bullets. But Sanchez is a hell of a boxer for long range with long arms. This is going to be a competitive fight, somewhere around 8-9 rounds, because Sanchez did have a hard time with a guy from the islands named Patrick Ford. When you look at that fight, he fought down to the level of his competition. He had a tough fight with Ruben Castillo, Pat Cowdell. That was split decision, but I believe from England. But Sanchez brings his A game because he respects Marquez. Sanchez wins by unanimous decision over a tough, gallant game Marquez. It'll be a tough fight, but Sanchez prevails. 115, 113, 116, 112. Another just 115, 113. He's going to win some rounds, but Sanchez wins the fight.
All right. And Stormy, how do you see this one?
This is a fight that could end up a lot like a Morales and Barrera, but the thing about it is, I think that Sanchez, with his ranginess and his height and everything, that would be the difference. He would be able to fight from a certain type of distance, and Marquez would be trying to get inside. We saw him have difficulty with Floyd Mayweather trying to get in. Floyd could keep him at a certain distance that he wanted. But as Curtis said, he would have his opportunities because of his great counterpunching and the fact that he could throw that uppercut under a jab, when you've seen the great counterpunchers be able to do that, a guy will throw a jab and they throw that left uppercut underneath that jab where you don't see it, and it can get you in trouble. I could see Marquez trying to set that type of trap, but I also see it as if there were no Salvador Sanchez, there might not be Juan Manuel Marquez. So this would definitely be a fight where it would be a lot closer, but I favor Sanchez with a decision, a close decision, maybe about 3 points or so like that. But I do favor Sanchez because he would have the fortune of being able to fight on the outside as well as mid-range. And I think that Juan Manuel will have to take the chances to get to him. So that's how I see it.
Yeah, I do see Marquez countering Sanchez early. And from there, Sanchez will bring it to the inside, catch Marquez with some uppercuts. Marquez had some good uppercuts himself, but I think Sanchez will use his inside game to, after the third or fourth round, to take over the matchup. And I also see him knocking down Marquez 2 or 3 times in his fight. So it'll be competitive, but as the rounds progress, little by little, Salvador Sanchez will show him who's boss and who's the best featherweight. And it'll end by decision. I think he'll have respect for Marquez. I think the crowd will enjoy the fight, but Salvador Sanchez will win and have his arm raised in the end. And Marquez may have a pretty battered up face too by the end of that fight. And I also see him winning just clear enough where we won't see the usual Marquez arguing about the decision afterwards. Chat, give me a 1 for Juan Manuel Marquez, Dinamita, or Shava, Salvador Sanchez. Give me your vote there. We're going to go to the next matchup here, and that's Ruben Olivarez against Yurokis Gamboa, Mexico against Cuba. Stormy, how do you see this matchup right here?
This is a fight where I pick Alvarez again because I think that he would not only have the ability to outfight Gamboa, but he'll also have that experience to outthink him in there and set traps and everything. Because Gamboa was very strong at this weight. He punched very good, very well, I should say. And Olivares was smart enough from the fights that he had fought to be able to set certain traps that Gamboa may not have seen, in his career. So I favor Olivares on this fight, and don't be surprised to see a flash knockdown by either guy early on. But I do believe that Olivares would be able to make the adjustments necessary to go on to a majority decision over Gamboa.
All right. And Curtis, how do you see this matchup?
I like Olivares in this fight. Something about Gamboa I just don't like. He shouldn't be getting knocked down a gazillion times, man. His balance is not always good, and when you fight a hell of a fighter like Olivares, man, that's suicide. I see Olivares knock him down a couple of times. I was going to say decision, but I'm going to go with a late round knockout, man. I think he gets Gamboa out of there. He doesn't have the best chin. His balance is not always good. Even though he had hand speed, he never can put it all together. Like I said earlier, with Cuban fighters, it's just something about the professional ranks. I thought they would be better equipped to handle the competition or just becoming a professional fighter. They never kind of really turned the corner. Lara has success and but there's been a lot of disappointments, and Gamboa has been a very disappointing fighter. I thought he was really gonna make some noise, but he didn't. And there's a lot of reasons I don't like fighters who have mental lapses and technical flaws like Gamboa with his balance. So I like Olivares to knock him down a couple of times and stop him, put pressure. It's gonna be in his chest, and it'll be a TKO. I will say about 11th round, or maybe the last round, 11th round TKO for Olivares over Gamboa.
You know what? I actually think this one ends early. And the reason I'm thinking that is I think Ruben Olivarez would know that if he gives Gamboa a false sense of security, he's going to put his hands down to his waist to try and show off, and he's going to get clipped with a big right hand. And even though he was more known as a bantamweight power puncher, but even at featherweight, a lot of his stoppages were early. And I think he knocks out Gamboa in the first 3 rounds. I think Gamboa puts his hands down. I think Olivares catches him and knocks him out cold early. Is how I personally see this matchup. Chad, give me a 1 for Olivares. Give me a 2 for Gamboa. Do you see it any differently? Let us know. All right. And that next matchup's going to be interesting. But now we have Nelson, Azumah Nelson from Ghana against Salido from Mexico. Salido pulled a big upset, from his countryman there, David Cote. And now Nelson has an opportunity to avenge his countryman's, loss here in that close decision. How do you see this one, Curtis?
Azumah Nelson, too polished for Salido. Salido's rough and rugged. He does have a bunch of losses, but I like Salido because he get the most out of his ability. But Azumah Nelson, great fighter. He can fight different ways. You look at the Jeff Fennick fight. The first fight he had malaria. He said he had malaria, and I thought he lost that fight. Then he goes to Australia, and one of his best performances knocks out Jeff Fennick, man. Set him up beautifully. Knocks out Rafael Gomez. You're not beating them guys unless you're a special fighter in their hometown. Nelson can move. He can box. He can counter punch. He could do it all, man. Azumah Nelson, TKO Salido in 9 rounds because Salido is going to try to rough up Azumah Nelson, and Azumah Nelson was very strong. Had a strong foundation about himself, and he gonna catch Salido with probably an uppercut, a combination, and he takes Salido out. So I like Azumah Nelson 9 rounds, and maybe a little earlier, but Azumah 9 because Zuma was a great fighter.
Absolutely. Stormy, how do you see this one?
I see this as Salido being taken to school by the professor, staying late after class and doing that homework and detention, and Nelson taking him out late. Kurt says probably like an uppercut. I see that left hook baiting Salido in while he's in the corner up against the ropes, and he catches Salido either on the chin or with a body shot and stops him. 9th round.
Right, chat. Give me a 1 for Azumah Nelson, a 2 for Salido. We're live and Caesar's Palace, Las Vegas, getting a lot of good fights here. Though this one, I think, like Stormy said, he'll be taken to school. The thing with Salido, man, if you stay patient, you can beat him. You know what I mean? You just got to be patient. Don't get caught in a firefight. Although, don't get me wrong, Nelson could probably beat him in a firefight too. But no reason to. You got to advance in the next round. It's a tough opponent. Take it easy and, box circles around him. Win a wide decision. I think that's what he would do. Right? And so Salido will that's the end of the road for him. No more playing spoiler. Okay? That is that. Chat, give me a 1 for Azumah Nelson. Give me a 2 for Orlando Salido. This next matchup, Alexis Arguello against Danny Lopez at their best at featherweight. How do you see this one, Curtis?
Oh, I got Alexis Arguello knocking Lopez out in 4 rounds. Bad matchup for Lopez, man. Arguello tall for the division and a puncher, and Danny was a puncher, but he wasn't quite as polished and good as Alexis Arguello. Arguello just a better all-around fighter, and Danny is a puncher. He had, him and Mike Ayala was a great fight. But this is not Mike Ayala. This is Alexis. Alexis Arguello lands the right hand in the 3rd round, takes him out in the 4th round. 4th round knockout for Alexis Arguello. Danny just ran into somebody who's just bad for him, and Arguello by knockout.
There you go, man. El Flaquito Explosivo. Alexis Arguello against Coloradito, Little Red. How do you see this one, Stormy?
Man, Kirby's still in my rounds, man. So I'm just going to go out on a limb and say 3rd round stoppage by Arguello, because that right hand was no joke, and Lopez was there and available for it. When he got knocked out by Salvador Sanchez in 2 fights, one fight he got knocked out, I think it was the 13th round, and the second fight it was the 14th round. So he hung in there for a minute. But, man, you can't hang in there against Arguello. Arguello's going to put you to sleep. And Lopez was the kind of fighter, he was kind of face first. And again, the shortest distance between 2 points is a straight line. You give Arguello that lineup of his right hand, as the sharpshooter he was, he's going to take you out. And that's how I see that fight.
All right, man. Alexis Arguello, I do agree, would win this fight, likely by stoppage. Scrapbook says toss-up, no pick. Interesting. I'd like to hear what you have to say about that one. The explosive thin man all the way says Bruce goes. Give me a 1, chat, for Alexis Arguello. Give me a 2 for Little Red. Tell me how you see this one. All right. Tell me how you see this one. We're going to go ahead and calculate those up. Man, this has been so far some interesting matchups for sure. How do you see a tournament so far, Stormy?
This has been an exciting tournament because there are knockdowns and knockouts in this tournament. Definitely. Not a lot of decisions going on here. You're seeing guys hit the canvas, and people like that, especially at Caesar's Palace, man. The place is rocking.
Absolutely. And we're heading to the Final 4. I'm updating the brackets here. Apologize, guys. But the next matchup is a big one. All right. It's going to be Mexico versus Mexico. Before I say that, Scrapbook says Lopez can take a punch. I do believe Alexis will come through. Well, there you go. Ultimately, he thinks Alexis would win. But, man, Salvador Sanchez against Ruben Olivarez. Stormy, how do you see this one?
Wow. This is going to be a tough fight, but at the end of the day, you can never, ever pick against Salvador Sanchez, going into a championship situation like this right here. Olivares is tough. He's had victories. He's had fights that were, back and forth and everything. But I do believe at some point Salvador Sanchez would get through to him, and I see it like 11th round, 12th round stoppage. If we're talking about going 15 in this instance between these throwbacks, it could be like a 14th or 13th round stoppage for Salvador Sanchez.
All right. And Curtis, how do you see it?
I got Sanchez by 8th round knockout. Olivares was a puncher. He was tough, but too tough for his own good. You can't fight like that against an intelligent fighter like Sanchez. You're playing into his hands. Sanchez is what we call a gentleman fighter. He fights with a certain class and intelligence. He's what we call a gentleman fighter. Me and my father. Bad matchup for Olivares. Olivares was rugged and tough, willing to trade, and that's not good. You got to remember, Sanchez had underrated footwork. When he bounced up and down and then start counter punching and boxing, man, it's a thing of beauty, man. He outboxes Olivares for 4 or 5 rounds, then start landing heavy leather Olivares and takes him out with a combination. Referee stops the fight. People going crazy in Vegas. Sanchez prevailed, moves on. Sanchez in 8 rounds over Olivares.
Yeah, look. Pound for pound, Olivares at bantamweight. Could probably argue, maybe. Better fighter, maybe. I don't think so, but it's arguable. But now he's moving up. He's going to Salvador Sanchez neighborhood. He's coming to his division. Like you're moving up to his natural division, right? And look, he got knocked out by Arguello. Eusebio Pedrosa in a one-sided beating. Although that was in the tail end. In fairness, of Ruben Olivares' career, Danny Lopez stopped him. There's no doubt in my mind. Salvador Sanchez. The one thing that might be a factor is now, he's going up against a Mexican legend, maybe someone he looked up to. But, hey, you got to do what you got to do. His trainer will tell him, hey, man, you got to take him out, right? We got a tournament to win. Okay, you got to take the legend out. And I think Salvador Sanchez, in an emotional victory, knocks out Ruben Olivares in under 6 rounds. All right. The natural featherweight wins. Chat, give me a 1 for Sanchez. Give me a 2 for Ruben Olivares. Tell me, what do you think? Now we're going to go to this matchup, bro. All right. Azumah Nelson against Alexis Arguello at their best at featherweight. Curtis, how do you see it?
Man, this is probably the most difficult of the whole tournament because I can see both men winning, man. You're talking about 2 great fighters, not one good and one great. 2 great fighters, man. Oh, man. I'm gonna pick. I could see Nelson having a lot of success because he's going to try to take away that right hand from Alexis Arguello. Man, Nelson had a very underrated ring IQ. He was very smart. He was very cagey. But I think Alexis' jab will have some success against Azumah Nelson. It's going to be a really, really tough fight. Nobody's getting knocked out here, but I see Arguello buzzing Nelson, but I also see Nelson buzzing Alexis Arguello. Alexis Arguello wins a very controversial split decision. The announcers is going crazy. They say Nelson won. Arguello behind the last 2 rounds come back and steals the fight in a very controversial fashion. Alexis Arguello moves on. Azumah loses, and in controversial fashion, like I said a couple of seconds ago.
Well, we are in Vegas, so if we're going to have controversy, might as well be in Caesar's Palace circa 1980. Stormy, how do you see this one?
This fight would be worthy of a trilogy. Definitely would get a rematch. If they fought a trilogy, I would say both guys would win 1 fight each. I know that. As Kurt said, it's a very difficult fight to call and pick, but I'm going to pick this one based on a big fight that Arguello lost, and that was the fight against Aaron Pryor. Aaron Pryor had a certain skill set, a decent chin, and he had resolved that he could take something to another level, and Arguello couldn't match that. Against the professor, he might run into the same type of thing, but the difference in this case would be that I think that Alexis would get the professor the first time around. He would win the fight, a decision, not a knockout, because the professor was smart enough not to put himself in a position to give a fighter like Arguello that type of satisfaction. But my goodness, the rematch would be something to behold. I'm telling you right now. But I got Alexis Arguello winning a close decision in a first fight that is begging for a rematch.
Oh, man. Let me tell you something, man. 72% KO ratio, and the ratio was higher when he was at featherweight by Alexis Arguello. The dimensions, I think it's only 12 rounds. It's going to take Azumah Nelson at least 5-6 rounds to kind of adjust to those dimensions. I mean, Alexis Arguello, I'm sure, sparred with plenty of guys with the dimensions of an Azumah Nelson. I'm talking arm length. I'm talking height. Like, where's Azumah Nelson going to – I mean, I guess he's going to have to spar some welterweight or something and fight dudes with those dimensions. All right, so it's not impossible, of course, but
Arguello would not have sparred anybody with that IQ he had, though.
Well, that's true. Without the shadow of a doubt, you're not going to find sparring partners that are good as the top guys in the sport. However, man, I don't know what to pick. Because it's going to be Azumah Nelson going to be prepared for this. You know what I mean? He's going to be ready for this. And Azumah Nelson, he wants that rematch with Salvador Sanchez too. You know what I mean? Because he only had 2 weeks to prepare the first time, right? I'm going to give it a very, very close. Look, it's going to take Azumah Nelson a little bit to adjust to those dimensions, and then he's going to take over. I think he's going to fight him on the inside. It's going to be rough. It's going to be a split decision. I'm going to be that judge that's going to slightly give it to Azumah Nelson. Chat, it is in your hands right now. All right? Does Azumah Nelson get a rematch, yes or no? But give me a 1 for Azumah Nelson. Give me a 2 for Alexis Arguello. Let me know what you guys think. This should be interesting. All right? Man, that's a tough fight. That's a tough fight. Let me see what chat's saying here. There might be a delay as far as the chat goes. But yeah, 1 Nelson, 2 Alexis Arguello. Man, this is we gotta let a man. Ain't nobody, no one's gonna pick. Not. I just gave you guys a storyline about a rematch with Sanchez. Ain't nobody thinking. Look at this. No one's taking the bait. All right. It's pretty lopsided, actually. Ain't nobody. Anyway. But with that said, man, that's too lopsided for as close as I think that fight would be. All right. Nelson win. There you go, 88. All right. But with that said, hey, man, explosive thin man all the way. And now we're heading to this big. This one might as well be the final. Most people would think that these two would meet in the end, maybe, but we still have a lot of great fighters in the next bracket. But Curtis, how do you see it, man? Alexis Arguello against Salvador Sanchez here in his first bracket final. Caesar's Palace is packed. How do you see it?
Salvador Sanchez versus Alexis Arguello, right?
Yep.
Well, Alexis Arguello, right hand is explosive. He has an uncanny way of landing it. It would not land against Salvador Sanchez. Salvador Sanchez would neutralize Alexis Arguello right hand, man, and he would, his speed and his counter punch ability will bother Arguello because Arguello defense wasn't that strong. It wasn't that good. He was very easy to hit, and his mistake was, if you notice, he would, to be tall, he never bent his knees. He was chin up in the air. He was upright. When you look at the prior fight, that was one of his flaws in his career. He was knocked down by Andy Ganigan. He wasn't hard to hit. He used to leave his chin up like a lantern in a storm. And Salvador Sanchez would take full advantage of his defense woes, his woes on defense, and I think Salvador Sanchez hurts Arguello, but he wins a decision, a wide unanimous decision, somewhere like 9 rounds to 3, maybe 8-4, but I'm going 9-3. You're going to see the boxing ability of a Salvador Sanchez in this fight because he's going to respect Alexis Arguello power. So you're going to see him not be as aggressive as he usually be. He boxes to a wide unanimous decision and outclasses Alexis Arguello.
All right, and Stormy, how do you see it?
I agree 100% with what Curtis said about Arguello's chin being up in the air and the fact that he didn't bend his knees. And Salvador Sanchez would be definitely paying attention to that. And I could see him knocking Arguello out with a left hook, give around 9 or 10. I would see Salvador being able to set but giving Alexis an opportunity to throw that punch so he could counter with his left hook. I see him taking Arguello out with a left hook. Finito.
Well, there you go, man. I agree. Salvador Sanchez would outclass Alexis Arguello. It would be competitive. It would be a good main event tonight. But I think by the time maybe the 5th or 6th round rolls around, I think Sanchez will find a way to turn those dimensions of Arguello against him. He'll bring the fight on the inside, and the shorter arms of Salvador Sanchez will prevail there. And Alexis Arguello's height is going to be a little bit of a problem there for him. I think the uppercuts on the inside are going to do a number on him. And I just think Salvador Sanchez had a little more tools, a little more versatile. I think he wins this one by a wide decision. I don't see a stoppage. Maybe it was 15 rounds, but I do see becomes one-sided after like the 9th round. All right. But so Salvador Sanchez wins in my book. But let's see how the chat feels about it. Give me a 1 for Salvador Sanchez. Give me a 2 for Alexis Arguello. Mexico against Nicaragua. Who wins this one? You guys put it in a chat, although it's pretty much already decided. And that is that, man. I mean, unless there's some miracle in the chat of some sort. But there's too many points for Salvador Sanchez at this point. Make sure you guys throw a jab at my like button. All right. And the ones already starting to come in. Curtis, did Caesar's Palace get their money's worth tonight?
Absolutely. The crowd is in an uproar, man. It's, boxing is back on the map. It's as strong as ever, man. People are going crazy. Hey, they chanting in Spanish. I forgot how you say it. Yes, we can.
Sí
You
se
know,
puede.
yes, that's one of my favorite chants. And it's boxing is back on front page newspaper because of the quality matchups.
Stormy, man, how's the atmosphere?
Well, as I said earlier, there were a lot of knockdowns in this fight, in this tournament, and a lot of KOs. Hey man, quality boxing though. Guys at the top of the class can't ask for better. I think that the people at Caesar's Palace, once again brought the house down with their noise, their support, and their cheering of the fighters that they were supporting. I think that this is one of those fights that scrapbook boxing was sitting in the sixth row, and
Okay.
hey, he'll be able to talk about it on the Three Wise Men.
Well, there you go, guys. This was a great first part of the brackets. Tomorrow we have some amazing matchups coming your way. And the winner of that bracket is going to have the honor of facing Salvador Sanchez. After winning that bracket, they're going to have to face Salvador Sanchez in the end. Hey, styles make fights. You never know. Stormy, give us some final thoughts.
Oh man, what a tournament! I wasn't there for the drafting, but you guys drafted some very good fights because we were able to go through these and make picks based on the styles and based on what the fighters brought to the table, more so than what may have sounded popular or something like that. And I think that's what made this such an exciting matchup for the first set of fights for this tournament. I just feel that there was a lot of quality here. And as I said, if we were seeing this or visioning this in actuality, you would be witnessing a lot of guys hitting the canvas and everything, but not because it's due to mismatching or something like that, but to the quality of the fighters and what they had to offer. I'm thankful to have been a part of this. I really enjoyed this evening. Thanks for having me.
Most definitely, man. And we're glad to have you here as well, Stormy, always. And Curtis, you as well. Thanks for coming on, man. Great commentary. Give us some final thoughts.
Well, it's not like the sport of boxing when you have quality matchups, man. These are dream fights that we made came true thanks to D Style and the commentary of Stormy B, man, his lending his expertise, and myself, of course. And what's up, Scrap? What's up, chat? Juan, when you have Sanchez and Arguello and and Azumah Nelson and Fredo Gomez, how can you go wrong? I mean, but they fought each other. They fought each other. And if Sanchez wouldn't have died, it would have been Sanchez and Arguello. That fight was going to get made. So I'm just glad to be a part of the fantasy tournament, man. It feels like a reality because I can see the fight in my head. I can see the trunks. I can see the playing of the mariachi bands and salsa bands and all that. So, great job. Our D Style takes work to do this, man. I'm just happy to be a part of it.
Absolutely. Thank you for joining me, guys. We'll be back tomorrow for the finale. A lot of great matchups. Some of the fighters were already mentioned. All right. With that said, guys, this is D Style Boxing. Keep it boxing. And we're out. Peace.
Peace.